Two Canadians who were arrested in China in 2018 have been released and are on their way home. Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig were accused of spying. Both denied the charges throughout. They were detained shortly after Canadian police had arrested a top Chinese technology executive, Meng Wanzhou of Huawei, on a US warrant. Their release seems to have resolved years of diplomatic tensions between Canada and China, and it came shortly after Ms Meng was allowed to leave Canada earlier in the day. Our North America correspondent David Willis reports.
Leaving her home in Vancouver for the last time after nearly 3 years of house arrest. Meng Wanzhou, a key figure in one of China's biggest companies, was facing extradition on charges of helping to evade US economic sanctions on Iran. She was freed suddenly after striking a deal with US prosecutors, which saw her admit in a virtual appearance before a New York courtroom to lying to banks on Huawei's behalf. In return, the US Justice Department dropped its extradition request.
Over the past 3 years, my life has been turned upside down. It was a disruptive time for me as a mother, a wife, and a company executive. But I believe every cloud has a silver lining. It really was an invaluable experience in my life.
Huawei is the largest telecom equipment manufacturer in the world, but its success unnerved the Trump administration, which accused the company of using its technology to spy on the US. Meng Wanzhou's detention was all the more controversial, given that she's the daughter of Huawei's founder, and it prompted the arrest of two Canadian citizens in China, diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spaver, in what the Canadian government branded an act of hostage diplomacy. To the delight of the Canadian Prime Minister, they've now been released as well.
About 12 minutes ago, the aircraft carrying Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor left Chinese airspace, and they're on their way home. They boarded at about 7:30 Ottawa time, along with Dominic Barton, Canada's ambassador to China.
Meng Wanzhou left Canada on an Air China flight bound for Shenzhen, but any prospect of a thaw in the adversarial relationship between the United States and China may prove to be short-lived. Huawei remains on a trade blacklist here and still faces charges of corporate espionage. David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Let's get more from our China correspondent, Robin Brant, who's in Shanghai. Robin, do we know what went on here? Was it a deal or a domino effect?
No, we don't. But look, within minutes of Meng Wanzhou being assured of her freedom, China announced that the two Michaels, as they are affectionately known in Canada, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, were being freed. So that appears, on the face of it, to set aside any pretense that their detention, and it lasted for over 1,000 years, one of them was 1,000 days, rather, 1,000 days, one of them was convicted of espionage, but that appears to set aside any pretense that their detention was not political, was not linked to Meng Wanzhou's detention. It was intriguing to hear her talk about her experience being on bail in Vancouver. She was free to go around the city. The two Michaels were in jail. It was intriguing to hear her talk about it being invaluable because she was able to do plenty of things and live her life to a certain extent free from restrictions and control. The two Michaels were not able to do. They were detained for over 1,000 days, one of them convicted, the other awaiting trial. All of that under China's politicized judicial system, which is very far from the transparency that Meng Wanzhou was allowed to benefit from.
And Robin, how much damage has this row between Canada and China done to that relationship, and how much of it can be restored in light of the events of the last 24 hours?
Well, look, this is the end of a hugely painful diplomatic standoff between Canada and China, two countries are very closely linked culturally and economically. Canada was essentially caught in the middle because, remember, it was an extradition request from the US that led to Meng Wanzhou's arrest in Canada. Canada said it was just abiding by its international treaty obligations, and it was the Americans who wanted to extradite her there, facing those allegations of fraud. Now, remember, she has admitted wrongdoing. She has admitted misleading US investigators. That is part of the deal. She's essentially copped a plea here. Investigators in the US say they will push ahead with their investigation into Huawei as a corporate entity, but in terms of her personally, it is done and dusted. But it's very difficult not to see this as some kind of deal. Who wanted it, who gave the green light for it on the US side, we just don't know. But Meng Wanzhou returns here. She is free. The two Michaels go back to Canada after their conviction for one and detention. But Meng Wanzhou has admitted wrongdoing. Look at social media here today and the censors are at work. You won't see any mention of that. You will hear about the return of a heroine. And she's talked about the motherland and praising China's Communist Party in a rather poetic statement she wrote from the plane. But remember, ironically, it's that party that Huawei, her father, went to such efforts to try to distance their company from.